All right, well, welcome to the modules on startup cost. So the first thing we're going to talk about is sales to investment ratio. The reason why we're going to talk about startup costs before finding your franchise is because it's important to understand what your options are in the budget, how to fund those specific franchises. It'll provide a lot of foundation and context to then narrowing down your search, right? And so most people start looking before they really start figuring out the startup and the funding, which is why most people spin their wheels and spend a year thinking about buying a franchise. So let's dive in. So what's great about franchising is the transparency of data and expectations via their FDD, franchise disclosure document. So with startup cost, every franchisor is required to list it in their FDD, which again, we talked about this, the franchise disclosure document, according to what it has actually cost other franchisees to get open. So and we're going to go over specific examples, pull up screenshots from FDDs, but when you see those numbers, that's what it actually cost franchisees to get open. These aren't just made up or guessed numbers. So you will have a very good idea of what the startup costs will look like, allowing you to make an educated decision from the beginning. So a criteria metric that you can use as a baseline, this is not the rule of thumb, is you want to look for something that has a sales to investment ratio of 2-to-1 or higher. So what do I mean by that? Meaning for every $1 in startup costs, you'll want to see $2, at least $2 in gross sales. So as an example, if a franchise costs $250,000 to get open and its average sales are $500,000, you are getting $2 in sales for every $1 invested in startup cost. Now, if a business has $250,000 in opening costs and the average sales is $400,000, that's an investment ratio of a sales to investment ratio of 1.6. Now, look, by first glance, it seems like something very basic, but it's something that's one of those things that are easier said than done. And it's really easy to forget when you're caught up in the details of looking at franchises. So here's where this sales to investment ratio will help a lot when the numbers start getting bigger. So let's say a franchise has $600,000 in opening cost, and the average unit does $950,000 in sales. Well, you may be hypnotized by the average performance of $950,000 in sales, which may seem high to you, but it only has a sales to investment ratio of 1.6. This is where what I have found, and speaking to literally hundreds of people in the franchise buying process, having worked with almost 200 now in our zero to profitable franchise system, is people get so emotional during this process and all logic and facts seems to go out the window. So when you have a specific criteria and you understand the criteria that you're looking for, it makes it a lot easier to make decisions. So to play devil's advocate is when looking at service-based franchises with very low startup cost. So I'll show you some examples shortly in the next modules, but there are some service franchises that have lower startup cost of $100,000, where you would want to see more than a 2-to-1 investment to sales ratio. And I would say a closer to 3-to-1 investment to sales ratio. We'll talk more about why when we dive into profit margins. I'm going to show you some franchise concepts and actually break down the disclosed profit margins. But, if you're targeting a 20% profit margin and the business is doing only $200,000 in sales and it's $100,000 to get open, it meets the 2-to-1 investment to sales ratio. But at a 20% profit margin, you're talking about $40,000. And at the end of the day, I think most of you watching this are looking to make a lot more than $40,000 in your business. And so The lower the numbers, well, even if you have a strong profit percentage, it's a strong profit percentage off a low number. So you always want to be thinking about what is the net, what is the amount of profits that it can generate you. But let's bring these numbers to life so it all makes sense, and we'll do that in the next video when we dive deep into startup cost. I'll see you there.